May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today is another Tassajara Story Day. So this is a piece that's in that group. It starts off with Tassajara relevance and just moves on. It's really basically, I just put together a whole piece on Steve Jobs because there's various things written about him. And I can't remember what I said. I mean, I wrote this like a year or two ago. And I have not reread it or anything. I'm just going to read it now. Well, that's true with every one of them that I read. Some of them it's been longer, although I've reread them. That's true. Some of them were written like 6 years ago or something. I've been writing those things and collecting stuff for a long time. And I've got a ton of notes, way more than could be used in a book. I could do a series, you know. Maybe that would be the best thing to do. But anyway, it's fun. So after we've had our pause to meditate, we'll get right into it. So when you hear the bell, hit pause and meditate or whatever you want to do for as long as you like. And when you're ready to come back, hit unpause. And we'll be here to hit the bell to end the meditation. And we'll get on with Jobs. Jobs. In the 1990s, Suzuki student Rick Levine was back at Tassajara with his wife, Frances, both medical doctors on vacation during the summer guest season. Rick was standing in front of the office when a big, comfy-looking SUV pulled up. It was a nice surprise to see Kobun Chino step out of the vehicle, and then a bigger surprise to see the driver emerge, a fellow Reed College alum whom Rick had never met but immediately recognized, Steve Jobs. He noted Kobun and Jobs seemed to be quite comfortable with each other. I bet they just drove in unannounced, right? Tassajara is open for day guests in the guest season, but reservations are needed to get those slots as well. It would be just like Kobun and Jobs also to decide to go there on the spur of the moment and come in without calling. Surely students were happy to see Kobun, and likely only a few, like Rick, realized whom he was there with. Britt Pylan recognized him, but like Rick, didn't want to bother them. It was not Jobs' first time to visit Tassajara. He'd come in a few times more than a decade before, though not with Kobun. In 1974, Steve Jobs had returned from months in India, where he'd gone seeking a guru. He was rather ragged with a shaved head and disappointed. Then, just as it's written in the classic texts, he finally found that guru at the Haiku Zendo, not far from the home where he grew up in Los Altos, California. He'd known there was a Zen group there from reading and rereading Zen Mind Beginner's Mind when he was at Reed College. The introduction by Richard Baker reveals that, except for the epilogue, the book is made entirely from talks given there. And in it, Suzuki says, "Today I am sitting in Los Altos. Tomorrow morning I shall be in San Francisco. There is no connection between the I in Los Altos and the I in San Francisco." Jobs started sitting at the Haiku Zendo regularly. Kobun was the head priest and teacher, and Les Kay made sure that all ran smoothly. Jobs went to both these priests with serious questions about work and practice. Les Kay wrote, "I met Steve during this time as we practiced together at Haiku Zendo. He was 20, a college dropout and a spiritual seeker. I was in my 40s, working for IBM and raising a family. I had also been ordained 4 years earlier as a Zen priest by Suzuki Roshi, and so had dual careers. Even though Steve was still a hippie in many ways, and I was part of an older generation living a buttoned-down middle-class life, he came to me with a number of fundamental questions and concerns about his life. I can still recall our first discussion around the question, what is work? What is its value? Does it have meaning? Initially, I thought the question to be naive, but I recognized that he was a deep thinker who wanted to understand the fundamental nature of life and how to find his place in the world. We had a number of conversations that year about work and life. Jobs made friends with others who sat at the Haiku Zendo. Jerry Halpern resumed sitting there in 1973 after a few years at Tassajara. Jerry wrote, "My sense is that Steve was bright and had an excellent sense of the beautiful. He didn't need any relation with Zen or Kobun for this. For instance, before he appeared at Haiku Zendo, he had a substantial interest in calligraphy. The first time I saw a copy of Feynman's lectures on physics was at his place well before Apple was founded." Jobs had gotten the spiritual bug at Reed College, along with best bud Daniel Kotke. One door to such interest was to be found in the calligraphy classes, first taught by the inspirational Lloyd Reynolds, and then continued by the Trappist monk Robert J. Palladino, who was the instructor when Jobs and Kotke were there. Jobs and Kotke read numerous spiritual books and especially liked Be Here Now, though Kotke said that Jobs' favorite was Zen Mind Beginner's Mind. A year after returning from India, Kotke moved back from the East Coast to Los Altos to help Jobs with his fledgling computer project. He said, "After India, the quality that most appealed to Steve was clarity, which I think he got from reading Suzuki Roshi's book." Jobs took Kotke to the Haiku Zendo and introduced him to Kobun, his new mentor. Kotke says that in the summer of 1976, 77, and 78, they drove in Jobs' old clunker to Tassajara to take the baths, walk around, enjoy the atmosphere, and buy some loaves of Tassajara bread at the office. He says it was for them an annual pilgrimage. He remembers the sound of the large Densho bell calling students to evening service and reminding them it was time to go back home. Kotke and Jobs and his girlfriend, Chrisanne Brennan, were living together in a house with a room Jobs would rent out. But for some reason, Kotka couldn't understand. Jobs stopped relating to him, wouldn't even speak with him. Kotka continued working on the engineering end of the rapidly blooming apple, but he was cut off from his best friend. There were no more pilgrimages to Tassajara. Jobs stopped going to the haiku zendo, but he continued his relationship with Kobun and occasionally with Les Kay. Jobs would show up late at Kobun's house. Harriet would not be pleased, so Kobun would go out walking with him on the quiet Los Altos streets, or to a bar or all-night coffee shop to talk. Jobs told Kobun one night that he wanted to go to Eiheiji Monastery in Japan, but Kobun discouraged that idea. Jobs was torn between his ideals of spiritual practice and creating a great computer. Kobun's message to him was that they aren't mutually exclusive. He encouraged Jobs to follow his passion. In Kobun's slowly delivered, halting words, "He was a very strange person. My wife was pregnant, and the delivery was imminent. One day around midnight, she opened the door when the bell was ringing. Then she came into my study room and said I should come to the door and that I knew too many strange people. She was clearly upset. There he stood, barefoot with dirty bare feet. He hadn't brushed his long hair. His jeans had many holes everywhere. He wanted to see me. I looked into his eyes. He looked terrible, but not crazy. I had to talk to him. I got my jacket and took him for a midnight walk to downtown. All stores were closed, but one bar with the name Teacup was open. We sat at the counter. I had Irish coffee and he had juice. He said, 'I feel I'm enlightened and I don't know what to do with this.' I responded, 'That's wonderful news, but I need proof of it. Please come back if you have proof of your enlightenment.'" Back then, Steve Jobs always said he wanted to go where I went. He asked me to make him a monk. He begged me to do so, but I said, "No, I want proof." He is a very bad student. He wants to do it, but he hesitates to join his sesshin. He is brilliant, but too smart. I think he cannot sit more than 1 hour. 1 hour and he is done. Kobun says that later Jobs came to him with a sheet of metal. Kobun invited him in, but Harriet said, "Not here." So they went out to the teacup again, and it was a circuit board or some part of a computer he and Steve Wozniak had come up with. Jobs said that was the proof. Kobun told this story at a talk thought to have been made on March 7th, 1993 at snow-covered Purig in Austria, a retreat he'd founded with his disciple Vanya Palmers. He was laughably off on some of the details and times. He said Jobs came to him 23 years ago and was 18. That would have been 1970 when Jobs, born in February of 1955, was 15. Jobs came to the haiku zendo for the first time after his trip to India in 1974 or 75. Kobun said Jobs had long hair, so Jobs' shaved head from India would have to have grown out. He likely started going to see Kobun in 1975 when he was 20. He said that Jobs called his proof the sheet of metal Lisa, whom Kobun identifies as Jobs' daughter. Kobun further says, "Lisa, the girl, not the computer, is 13 or 14 years old now. What makes me happy is that she sees me as a godfather. Whenever we meet, she runs up to me and speaks in Japanese. Maybe that is the proof of enlightenment." Now, Lisa was born in May 1978, and for the first few years, Jobs denied he was the father and wouldn't pay child support. Kotke, who was still working at Apple then, says that work didn't start on Lisa until 1979, that Jobs was kept away from the team that did that work by order of the Apple board because the former IBM engineers that developed it didn't want Jobs bothering them. He further says that he thinks the name Lisa was given to that computer project by the developer as a jab at Jobs. It seems to me that the essence of Kobun's story about Jobs is true, but that the supporting details are washed around as in a dream. Kobun did become close to Lisa. She still remembers him fondly. In the late 70s, Harriet and Kobun split up. With Kobun's help, she moved to Arkansas with their 2 children. Kobun got together with a new love named Stephanie, a Juilliard-trained violinist in law school, so that he could be within a day's drive of his kids in Arkansas. They moved to Arroyo Seco, a community above Taos, New Mexico. Early Tassajara student Bob Watkins had been inviting him to come there for years. Kobun was still involved with his students in California from the Haiku Zendo, the Santa Cruz Zen Center, and Jikoji, a retreat in the woods near Santa Cruz. While there, he and Stephanie lived in Steve Jobs' 17,000 square foot Spanish colonial-style house in Woodside, not far from Los Altos. When Jobs was booted from Apple in 1985, he founded Next and built an even better computer. Kobun was the official spiritual advisor for that company. Kobun performed a marriage ceremony for Jobs and his fiancée, Lauren Powell, in 1991 at Yosemite. Kobun devastated Stephanie when he announced at the dinner table at Jobs' place that he had a new love. Kobun introduced me to Katrin, his young German wife-to-be, at Taizan Maizumi's funeral in L.A. in 1995. He was smitten. She was smiling and pregnant. Stephanie was there, too. "Children never came to us," he said to her. Bob Watkins, who'd been ordained by Kobun and whose Taos home became the original Hokkyoji Zendo, gave Kobun a great deal of financial support through the years, even though he didn't have a lot to spare. Watkins said he once called Steve Jobs asking for some financial help for Kobun, and that Jobs said he'd only give Kobun money if he came back to live there. Watkins, Richard Baker, and Kobun walked to the site for Kobun's home to be in Arroyo Seco. There was only the foundation. I've been there with Kobun, too. Kobun said he couldn't afford to complete it. Bob asked Kobun why hadn't he ever asked Jobs for money. Kobun said it had never occurred to him. Jobs reestablished his relationship with Les Kay in the late 1990s, and Kay established a meditation at work program at Apple. He wrote, "Steve called me one night shortly after Kobun died in 2002 in a tragic drowning accident. He was in tears. He loved Kobun, who was a significant influence in his life." Les Kay remembers, "My steadiest client has been Apple. A number of times over the years, I was able to meet with Steve for lunch in the company cafeteria after class. Steve liked that I was bringing meditation at work to Apple. He had continued his Zen practice occasionally, as he told me, and continued to be influenced by its principles. Not well known is the depth of Steve's spiritual orientation, the time he spent exploring and practicing Zen Buddhism in the 1970s, and how his practice influenced the design of the Apple products of the past 35 years. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from Sleepy Sonor with Dogette Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.